Well, welcome to everyone for joining us. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the community coming out for this. It's a really exciting time for Bribe, and we're looking forward to sharing more information on the protocol and our upcoming LBP token launch. The token launch will go live on CopperLaunch this Tuesday, January 25th. Today is our first of back-to-back AMA days. Tomorrow we'll also be having another AMA at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that will be held on Twitter Spaces. I'm here today to help moderate this discussion. I'll be pulling questions from the chat. Please feel free to post your questions up in there. Upvoting questions that you want to be heard is incredibly helpful, so everyone is encouraged to do that. We'll also be accepting people to ask their questions live on air. I'll try to strike some balance between the chat and having people talk, but we love having people provide their voice to the conversation, and we encourage everyone who wants to ask a question to do so in that way. I'll let the hosts introduce themselves before jumping into a few introductory questions. Then I'll be sourcing questions from you all. I really appreciate everyone bearing with me as we juggle that process. Well, I'm really excited for this. I hope you all are too. And I'll let the hosts introduce themselves.
Thanks so much for the intro. Condorcet here, founder of Bribe Protocol. Can't wait to get into it.
Brainjar, head of products and founder of Composable.
RTX, are you there? Having some trouble hearing you. Is that just me?
No, same.
All right, well, you figure that out. We'll continue. We'll jump into the questions and hopefully get that resolved. We'll kick it off with something very simple. For anyone who's new to the channel or might want a brief recap right from the source, what's the elevator pitch for Bribe Protocol?
Love it. Bribe is a DAO tooling protocol. We build products to make DAOs in the DeFi space work more intuitively. And our flagship product, the kind of reason behind our name and a lot of our ethos is voter extractable value. It's the product that we'll be launching this week, kind of in tandem with the LBP. Voter extractable value specifically we view as the as kind of the fundamental layer of the DAO tooling stack that we see as kind of archetypal of DAO 2.0, if you will. Voter extractable value is the base layer that allows for a market to be built around governance. So we see voter extractable value take many different forms today. Through it looks like convex on convex and Vodium on the curve gauges. It looks like Bribe integrating with Aave. The point of voter extractable value, regardless of the form that it takes, is to get voters incentivized to participate in governance and to, the way I see it, fairly allocate the rewards or the outcome, the value of governance, to fairly allocate that to the folks who are actually participating. And kind of the rest of the tech stack follows from there.
Yeah, VEV is definitely something that we've been hearing a lot about, sharing a lot about. It's very exciting. Something we can touch upon more is, how does Bribe work versus other delegation protocols?
Yeah, it's a really great question, especially because there are certain, there is a lot of experimentation that's happening with delegation right now. One thing to call out, so Maker is experimenting with actually paying delegates who vote with something like greater than a 90% participation rate. Paying those delegates for their role in the Maker ecosystem. It makes a lot of sense when we look at the Aave parallel example, which is, again, like even Maker just sending direct payments to their delegates. It's in a way, it is an example of, voter extractable value. And there is value that comes from, these kinds of things. For instance, as we're integrating with Aave, there are, folks, there are kind of sophisticated delegates who are incentivized and empowered to kind of run the Aave DAO. And as a base, kind of as a, as a first, step to formulating DAOs, to making them work, having these kinds of more technical experts, is incredibly important. So that's kind of how we look at the space right now. I think that there are like DeFi products that are well established, that have DAOs that are kind of alive and well today. They tend to, the delegation market right now for them tends to look like a really consolidated number of addresses, like let's say 10 to 20 or something like this, who represent kind of delegates who are well known, like influencers in the ecosystem, and major whales, maybe VCs or core team members who have large stakes in the ecosystem as well. And it's kind of this group which is kind of making all of the decisions on the platform. So we basically see Bribe emerging in an environment where most DAOs work with this model, and a lot of the exciting bribery activity is starting to pop up only in the context of the curve wars, really.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, I feel like the pools are another element too. I mean, as they're staked together, the powers of the pools is something that's extremely important when talking about Bribe.
One thing I just wanted to also add to, like, I think delegation is interesting from the standpoint of getting more activity within proposals and stuff like that, but it really doesn't actually increase participation on a broader scale. I think it's like incredibly unfair to smaller holders that want to actually do voting, but still don't really want to have to make a decision about, which delegate to actually, delegate their votes to. Plus, these delegates don't actually pay for the votes that they're getting delegated to. So I think it's like fundamentally a flawed design because of the fact that there's like, we're leaving a lot of assumptions we're leaving basically a lot of power in the hands of delegates under assumptions that they will be acting in the best interest of the community. But oftentimes, as we know, these interests are not necessarily that of the community, but that of themselves. And I think delegation platforms have started the conversation about improving participation and governance, but there really isn't a tangible, not only increase in the world of governance participation pre-delegation platforms, but also there is now the problem of delegates becoming too powerful.
Agree. It is a bit of a complicated space right now, particularly I would say because there isn't money on it. Like there's not a bunch of on-chain activity in the lead up to major proposals getting passed, on major DeFi DAOs. So it's really hard for us to to kind of to have this conversation without some kind of very clear and transparent on-chain mechanism for the transferal of value throughout the governance process. And so essentially that's why we built VEV. Of course it's worth.
Go ahead.
Of course, it's worth calling out Convex as well, because in a sense, Convex, the Convexes and Vodiums of the world are kind of like AMM delegates themselves, if you will. So to me, these are additionally kind of steps forward, saying, that is to say, if I'm a user on Curve, I have now, quote unquote, these AMM delegates who can delegate for me in a way that both maximizes my kind of yield at the end of the day, and that's very clear and on chain. Kind of the behavior is crystal clear, actually, what's happening, and that to me explains the explosion of growth for Convex.
I think also what's really interesting to point out too is like we obviously have like a bunch of fighting over governance in different protocols that are now adopting the V token model. But like, what's really interesting to me is like we still have so much of governance is still so broken in all the large protocols. We saw the fiasco with Uniswap over the summer. We definitely still see issues with the Aave governance process. Like there definitely still seems to be some sort of like shadowy forces acting behind all of these DAOs. And I think what's really important is like Bribe basically is just coming in there and trying to remove the shroud of darkness at the moment that's like prevailing within these large DAOs and ecosystems. I mean, just taking Aave as an example, right? Like MIM has been around for quite a while now. Like the fact that it has not been brought in as collateral yet, or even as a lending asset, it just goes to show that there's like still a lot of broken, delayed and slow processes within governance itself. And, I think that's why, starting with this proposal makes a ton of sense, I think, to really illustrate Bribe's use case.
Definitely. I mean, we're bringing governance back on chain. Branger, you touched upon something too. The upcoming LBP coincides with voting on Aave Improvement Proposal to add MIM to Aave. What does the MIM proposal mean, and what's the process? What process would a frog take to bid on a Bribe pool?
Yeah, I mean, echoing Brainjar, the MIM proposal is so important. I mean, I think about it as like, it's really going to be one of the first, and again, there's no way to really know, right? But to my knowledge, it'll be one of the first kind of externally driven proposals to ever pass governance in a major DeFi DAO. Curious, like if those in the audience have other examples, I would love to kind of hear a bit of the history of like these sorts of efforts. But I mean, that's the way, frankly, the way that we look at it is like everything that we're doing comes down to the MIM proposal right now, and ensuring that this kind of like inexplicable inefficiency where Aave would be getting value from hosting MIM, where MIM users would be getting value from having the integration with Aave, and where like the only reason that this integration isn't happening seems to be the fact that nobody has $100 million worth of spare Aave votes to actually make it happen. With all of that context, this Bribe proposal really does become one of the first times in the short history of DeFi where this sort of decision, this sort of inefficiency can be bridged by an external protocol. It is our job to bridge inefficiencies like this to make sure that governance is working, as well as it can. And to me, like this is where the rubber hits the road with actual proposals, identifying inefficiencies and bridging them.
What I really love the most about Bribe is we're literally just bringing it back to basics. Like, there's all this rhetoric. Again, I just cannot stress this enough. There's all this rhetoric about like B tokens, about bribing and different things within ecosystems that are just now adopting the B token model. Like at the end of the day, who actually really cares, right? It's like, do you care more about fundamental changes in the DeFi ecosystem that are blocked for, again, as Condorcet mentioned, from inexplicable inefficiencies, or should we go waste our time talking about useless V tokens that control some very like random gauge for some emissions? Obviously, curve wars aside, like that, that's really like, what I see in the ecosystem is why you even start talking about those protocols before you even have, this type of transparent governance and sort of increase in efficiency for proposals and participation. That's really what I find interesting about Bribe, is being able to just bring it literally back to the basics. Like there is there has been no change in governance for years. Governance has been around for a long time now. And I think the fact that, why MIM is super important is because, Aave should be in a point, and other protocols that are like large protocols in the DeFi ecosystem should be in a point where if communities start up and if a community is interested in seeing something, then those communities should have at least a level playing field for conversing about getting something in the door as a protocol integration. And the fact that for years, these types of conversations have always been limited to sort of backdoor communications and forums with sort of like large holders of a specific token, I think shows that we don't have a level playing field, and nothing around the topic of governance is actually decentralized. And so I think this is really introducing a narrative game-changing product that just brings us back to thinking, okay, what is wrong with governance just straight up from the outset?
Yeah, bringing it back to the basics. I know we had one person that was requesting to speak before. Also, definitely show some love to our chat there. We'd love to get people's questions on board. I have one more that I'll throw out before trying to pull some of those in, so definitely feel free to queue there. But the LBP is coming up. It's really big. What's the most important thing people should be aware of with the upcoming LBP?
There's an equation, sir. That equation is very simple. So 10% of bid money early on goes to bribe stakers. Of course, the only way to kind of bootstrap your bribe supply quickly is with the LBP. The only other way that emissions are coming this early on or that kind of bribe is coming early on is via emissions. So to recap, if you want this 10% of the bid, which is distributed to bribe stakers in the Aave pool, the LBP is your way to go. Now, as you all have seen, the proposal that's on the table coming from Abracadabra is, shoots for around $5 million. We're hoping that, we get the bid up to at least, something like $1 million in order to guarantee that we're going to have enough Aave, enough yield to have enough Aave to pass the proposal. So with all of that context, the way that you want to think about when to hit buy on the LBP, and honestly, we're trying to be, of course, fully transparent here. So everyone should know how an LBP works before you participate. Understand the price will start very high and will come down. You want to be ready to buy around 24 hours after the LBP starts in order to ensure you're not going to get left behind, right? So do your research, understand kind of the context of how LBPs work. And when it gets to the point where this equation makes sense to you, that is where I would buy. The equation being, if I want to get exposure to this bid revenue, coming from the first and subsequent proposals on Aave, then I'm going to need, to get access to bribe through the LBP. Our tokenomics, they're open access. You can, available to kind of, but the 2 cents on tokenomics is that community distributions are always going to outweigh any kind of private distributions. Not just in aggregate, but on a monthly basis. There will never kind of be any outsized opportunity for, early investors or the team or anyone like that, to dump. We've specifically constructed the tokenomics in this way. The other thing is that there's long vesting. So we're going to start with a very small percentage of supply actually released. Again, details available in our articles on tokenomics, talking about how kind of vesting happens over the next 3 years. But if you're focused on this upcoming proposal and and the few that are sure to follow it, LBP is your surest way to go. Hope that clarifies things for everyone a bit.
Yeah, definitely a big shout out to the content team for getting those articles and the whole Bribe team for sharing those on our Medium. It definitely something that I think you touched upon in past AMA too, is like, this is your chance to get a seat at the table. Really, like, you can get by engaging this LBP, you get your chance to engage and have your seat at the table long term within Bribe, which is very, very exciting. Something from the chat that someone had posted, they talked about proposals for Aave and MIM coming up, and like how Bribe impacts those. Do you mind touching upon the vantage point Bribe takes when it comes to engaging with proposals?
Yeah, totally. I mean, what's exciting about the MIM proposal is that it is kind of bribe driven, as in we identified the inefficiency, we wrote a proposal to bridge it, we kind of did our research on Aave, and we're actually, we're working right now on a risk assessment from Aave's perspective so that they can understand exactly how the proposal is going to impact their AMM. So what's beautiful about this proposal is that Bribe is kind of, it's a proof of concept for the entire process. There's a lot that has to be done, for a proposal to be created and go through. However, we hope that, in the steady state, Bribe stakeholders, DAOs themselves will start to see how this kind of activity and this kind of thinking drives value, in forming integrations between DAOs. Hopefully, we'll all start to understand that this is market optimal for the entire DeFi ecosystem. And from that point, Bribe will become, Bribe will start to sit more in the back end, we expect, where the smart contracts being, having been audited, proven, well understood, will kind of enable a lot of the governance behavior that we want to see happen. But as a starting point, we really have to role model it. And so that's what we're doing, inefficiency to governance proposal. We can now.
Oh, perfect. I have a question, and maybe you can touch upon this and talk about how the differences between flash attacks that could happen at people trying to game governance compared to what you're actually doing with Bev, how it actually solves and protects. I think it protects governance more than anything else.
For sure. I mean, there was this tweet, I think that you shared with me, RTX, yesterday, that actually hammered this point home pretty well. That, tweet went something like, well, I know we're all focused on, these bribery protocols right now, but can't like any lending platform kind of work like a bribery protocol? And the answer is absolutely correct. Vitalik introduces this idea. It was one of the driving, it was definitely one of the driving ideas that we kind of took into consideration when designing Bribe. Like, whatever we have to build, whatever we're going to build needs to be a step up, needs to be more market optimal than what is just a lending platform. And frankly speaking, like, we see some competitors continue to take that route, kind of creating a lending AMM and calling it a bribing platform is essentially a lot of the behavior that we're seeing today. Which obviously doesn't work. So what have we done instead? Well, first and foremost, there's the idea of the Bribe Coalition. So instead of the same lending platform potentially being used on both sides of the aisle, so instead of, the same supply of, let's say, Uniswap votes on Aave being used to vote for and against a proposal, in which case their actual voter extractable value is pitted against each other. Instead of, that situation happening, anyone who stakes with Bribe is going to ensure that they always get voter extractable value. as long as, of course, the product is working, as long as Bribe, has the requisite voting power. A user is always going to get voter extractable value working with Bribe because they're in a coalition which works together. Which is, as a first step, is very important to us with kind of this transparency and intuitive governance story. The second step, however, is it is really addressed kind of as we layer on Bribe governance itself on top of these various Bribe pools. Specifically, one reason that we integrated with Aave early on is that we have a bit of an insurance policy, and that is the Aave veto. Because Aave has a veto mechanism called the Guardian Multisig that can actually cancel any proposals even after the DAO has voted and approved them. Because of that, even though it's not an ideal solution for us, like, a DAO with an off-chain veto, how much of a DAO really is that? This can be debated. However, practically, on day one, it's good for us to kind of stave off adverse behavior on the platform. i.e., I'm not going to bid for a proposal that I think is never actually going to get executed, e.g. something like shut down Aave, because we know that the Aave team is just going to veto that at the end of the day. Something like the MIM proposal, however, should be, of course, a completely different story. Now, while Aave, we have this tactical solution which takes the form of the Guardian Multisig veto. As we continue to improve bribe pools, we actually do have our own veto function attached to the bribe pool. And while this isn't for the team to use, it does provide kind of an avenue for the Bribe DAO. Once the token gets out there and we've started to, build a community of people who are really familiar with the product and know how to use it well, we can start to pass off the veto to their hands. So to me, the short of it is that you need someone whose business model it is to make governance work correctly, who can frankly monetize making governance work correctly. And, I think some people would probably say, well, if you want to do that, you should start a foundation and maybe get some donations from DeFi protocols and try to, but obviously that's not how business is done in this space. We're creating voter extractable value, of course, to put money in the hands of voters, to make these ecosystems work more efficiently, to bridge gaps, to do integrations, etc. But also, we do need a business model around a company that can properly own a veto mechanism for a DAO. And while, basically can own that veto mechanism, it's like an extremely important part of how we think about our roadmap and about our responsibility as a DAO tooling protocol in the space.
Condorcet, you're talking a lot about philosophy there, the philosophy of Bribe, which I think is very important. We had someone in the group chat, and again, feel free to give our group chat some love, the AMA chat, and also request to speak. We'd love to hear your voice when asking your questions. But someone did talk about bribery, and the integral part of DAO is governance. In the real world, democracy plays a very important part in making everyone an equal. Kind of to summarize the question too, how does Bribe give these smaller voices more of a voice, more representation, kind of leveling the playing field?
I hate to hit you with more philosophy, but also a very foundational question, right? And the answer is pretty simple. Unfortunately, there are not too many avenues for true democracy, for true democratization in the current DeFi space. We live in a paradigm where one governance token equals one vote, and where kind of to pass to get any outcome passed on most DeFi protocols, to initiate a vote, I need at least, say, $1 million worth of votes. To actually have it passed, I need more on the order of 100 million to, the problems, frankly speaking, the problems that we're trying to solve is more kind of the tactical
you cut out there a little
steps
bit.
that we can take forward right now. Voter extractable value as well. Oh, sorry.
Condorcet, you're cutting
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, I mean,
Condorcet is still cutting in now. Brainjar, do you have any thoughts on this, the philosophy piece that Condorcet was touching upon?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So basically, the concept of bribe is really just, as Condorcet was talking about, really just about leveling the playing field. So being able to allow somebody to be able to cast their vote in the form of basically, bribing a pool and signaling how they would like those votes to be allocated, not only solves the voter apathy problem from the standpoint of Aave token holders themselves, but also then creates a conversation where people can transparently see a tenor of how is the current vote looking like. Obviously, there's like snapshot where you could see yes or no, but this also then provides transparent monetary importance regarding how people in the community want a specific vote to actually go through. And so I think, for instance, let's just take this example of MIM on Aave. Very simply, people who would like to see this specific vote pass can either bribe the existing Aave pool and vote yes and intend to become the highest bidder, or they can also commit their Aave. In this case, of course, their Aave could be used to vote yes or no, but you obviously can see the current bids, and if you think that the highest bidder who has voted yes, for instance, is going to win, then you provide that Aave. And so in this case, right, whereas previously we would have left everything up to just the Aave governance process, there is now this third party playing field leveler that allows for Frog Nation and other people who want to see MIM pushed through Aave be able to have a voice by directing a big pool of Aave towards a specific vote. But also too, right, like if there was, for any reason, if this proposal was to not go through, then it also provides an additional source on chain of historical evidence as to how this decision was made, slash what the current tenor of the community is on this specific topic, right? If, for instance, the Aave DAO multi-sig that Condorcet was mentioning decides to veto this, right, then we have a very clear log of what was happening within the Bribe Protocol as an additional transparency point to illustrate how the people were thinking about this as the vote was going on. And so I think from our standpoint, it's definitely very sort of strong to see that Bribe is now providing a new sort of third party additional route for people to more forcibly be able to have their voices heard. And yeah, I think that's sort of my general perspective.
Appreciate you sharing your perspective. We have a request to speak. I'm going to invite you to speak right now. Just sent the invitation. Yeah, we can hear you.
Hey, I really like the initial 3 weeks. Someone buys in, hasn't had the experience with the bouncer. Pretty cool what can happen if they throw in, even if they try to time it right on the initial auction, what could happen for the next 3 weeks of mining or liquidity mining. I've seen it before where basically that liquidity pool opens, a bunch of whales go throw a bunch of money, artificially pump their token, that bouncer pool, and then they dump on everybody. So I just wanted to ask, how do you guys foresee that? I think you can.
I mean, so basically, like as Condorcet illustrated, there's going to be, $5 million worth of bribes from just MIM alone, according to their forum posts and their snapshot governance vote. If you were to stake those bribes, you receive so basically 500,000 of actual value is up for grabs by people who are staking bribe into the Aave pool. So and really here too, like the real sort of like kicker is that this isn't just an Aave pool one-off situation. Like we have like several other proposals flowing throughout the rest of the month.
The sushi LP. That's the one I'm most concerned about. Sushi LP as majority liquidity pool holder, and then basically get a bunch of bribe and sell it all off.
Ranger, were you able to make out that question? The connection's a little tough right now.
I was basically answering the point, which is like basically you would be like whales would basically, even if there are whales in the pool, like it doesn't make sense for them not to be staking their bribe to obtain additional value from a recurring revenue stream that is the Aave pool. So like, there's no magical answer to stopping people from dumping, but there's obviously like mathematics that we have that makes people we just have to communicate from a game theoretical standpoint. Does it make sense for somebody to sell their bribe, or does it make more sense for them to continuously earn revenue from a recurring revenue stream? And I think everybody on this call would agree with me that a recurring revenue stream makes more sense. And so just illustrating this more clearly to the user is obviously the job of the bribe team.
Especially because who's selling right now? Goodness, as much as it sucks to be in this market, it might be the best time for us to LBP.
Yeah, absolutely. Hot take, because like there's no other protocol that literally earns you money, like hard, like cash for participating in a protocol. Like what protocol do you know gives you actual USDC or other assets as actual reward, right? It's all just like native token yield.
Yeah, we appreciate you asking the question too. We have kind of a follow-up in the chat here. In what way is the Aave pool a reoccurring revenue pool? Can we get more information on that?
Yeah, so I can just start that, and then Condorcet, you could follow up. But basically, the idea is that this pool is for all proposals on Aave. So obviously, it needs to be done in a consecutive manner, which is how governance happens in Aave anyway. So as one proposal wraps up, another proposal will get started, and bribes can begin on bribe for that proposal yet again. And so it basically is into perpetuity forever, all proposals on Aave. Obviously, some proposals matter a lot more than others, and the bribe team will be making proposals that are as not, if not more controversial than this MIM proposal. But yeah, That's the answer.
As long as it's at the right price, right? The alpha here, the alpha that comes from Aave's governance, is primarily two things. It's new integrations like adding new collateral types and changing parameters. Kind of risk treatment for collateral types. So, there's also some marginal stuff probably around salaries, how they're paying different DAO participants, all of that kind of stuff, maybe protocol emissions. But typically, you tend to see every couple of weeks or once a month an on-chain vote on Aave that mobilizes, around $100 million worth of Aave to add one of these new collateral types. Recent examples, for instance, have been the Fei stablecoin and the Frax stablecoin. So MEM, comes, of course, in that tradition. The difference being that rather than, the Frax effort kind of being driven by Frax BD and, the Aave team or, kind of that kind of personal relationship, now, of course, Bribe is facilitating direct, like DAO to DAO collaboration. There's, it's not kind of necessary to have any individual leaders here. It's more about Bribe seeing the opportunity and making the connection. So as more proposals come through, of course, the platform will automatically reset. Our front end kind of reads Aave governance in the same vein as something like a provider like Sybil, and or Boardroom or Commonwealth, and which all platforms I actually encourage you all to check out. Our front end kind of operates in a similar way. It tells you what is going on in Aave governance, and then whatever the proposal is. First, of course, MIM. But also, all collateral type listing proposals to follow MIM will come through our platform and basically represent a bidding opportunity.
Yeah, it sounds like you're addressing some of the things that are coming up on Aave and MIM. Can we go into more detail on the main objectives in the Aave and MIM forums, and how do we plan to address these with Bribe?
Yeah, I think the coolest thing with MEM that I like is that it is kind of this, like, it's this stable coin that, of course, is algorithmically stabilized, but also kind of allows for the user of the stable coin to be generating revenue on the underlying collateral. So we're staking kind of yield-bearing tokens to print MEM to catch everybody up, which represents, essentially a stablecoin with a lot more easy to access underlying utility than some of the stablecoins that are on Aave today. For instance, we all love USDC, but we're not. It's incredibly useful. It's got all of these bridges back into the real world. It's fantastic. Yet I'm not, I don't happen to know off the top of my head a place where I can make my USDC super productive. Honestly, now that I'm saying it, maybe there is, but where I can make my USDC super productive also while I'm using it everywhere else. These sorts of use cases are still relatively novel. Hence the blockbuster success of protocols like Abracadabra, who developed MEM. So the fact that now we are and I even call out, like, Frax and Fei are some of the most recent additions to Aave. I think Brainjar mentioned this earlier. Kind of, it's obvious what's going on here. The wave of DeFi 2.0 of kind of Olympus Pro fork, applications, making better use of liquidity, lower slippage, etc. All of this stuff, preserving governance tokens, all, replacing liquidity mining, all of these DeFi 2.0 activities are coming about now, and the older DeFi 1 protocols like Aave, they need to adapt and they need to integrate. So that we can provide a new crop of users, access to the stability and transparency that is the Aave DAO. So that's really kind of what it's about to me. I don't know if you want to get philosophical again, but just like lowering the barrier to entry. If I'm a user of MEM, why can't I use Aave? To me, these kinds of political questions, there are echoes in all of the countries that we live in. So let's break down these arbitrary barriers kind of where it's possible.
We're talking a lot about what the world looks like with Bribe. What would a frog have to go through to list on MIM or on Aave if there was no Bribe?
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine? One incredibly important thing, honestly, that gets to this idea of Bribe as a business model. One piece of evidence that this is very important is the Aave risk assessment. To catch everybody up, like as new collateral types are added to Aave v2, this is of course an AMM that kind of takes on some risk for each new collateral type that it adds. To give you a sense, it's like the bank taking your shoe as collateral. Of course, you wouldn't want to do that because if you don't come back for your shoe, then the bank is out on whatever money they lent you. They don't want to take something that's not worth anything. So that is kind of how Aave looks at the problem. Aave as a lender operates as this bank that wants to ensure that all of the collateral types that they add are going to have value essentially, into perpetuity. And so, of course, as we've mentioned, as someone who wants to get MEM listed, I have to do a combination of talking to delegates or core team members or whales or VCs to try to get them to back my proposal, and or acquiring tens of millions of dollars worth of the vote token myself in order to even start the proposal. Then I'm going to have to convince the team. Not only am I going to have to do all of that, but I'm also going to have to convince the DAO, the broader DAO, that this is not just some random idea that I came up with, that from a risk perspective, it actually makes sense for Aave. And the reason to me that is a crucial kind of condition or crucial requirement, crucial obstacle for getting, a new collateral type listed on Aave is that it's just really hard to do. From a technical perspective, you kind of have to understand the culture of the Aave risk DAO. You have to understand, who the main kind of risk thinkers and contributors are. You have to be able to run an analysis yourself in many cases, or pay someone to do it for you. So it's kind of all of these conditions that we don't even think about that actually come to life, when someone like Bribe makes it their job, makes it their business to ensure that these kinds of proposals are going through. It's all of these things that we are getting good, that we're building the muscles to tackle on a routine basis right now.
I know a lot's been discussed today. Brainjar, do you have thoughts? I know you need to run soon.
Yeah, I mean, as Condorcet was mentioning, like very simply, like doing stuff in DAOs just takes a lot of bureaucratic effort, and the governance process is a good shortcut to getting people's opinions on things, but it's not the solution. And I think that to drive further efficiency, this is what Bribe is here to do. I mean, again, as Condorcet mentioned, who the hell has time for this level of bureaucracy? Everything moves so quickly within the DeFi space. Like, imagine Daniele having to go chat to like 20 different people to talk about MIM getting listed on Aave. It's like none of those people are like really worth Daniele's time, and none of the people who like, and just generally speaking, like as a protocol founder, like you don't want to go speak to 20 different people to get something done, right? Like, I mean, even from my perspective, like trying to chat with the Kusama Treasury Council, et cetera, like there's just so much bureaucracy and different stuff that needs to get put together. It's like, look, like this is just completely unnecessary. So even if the proposal doesn't necessarily pass, at least we're able to get the conversation going that, it didn't pass for XYZ reasons. And those XYZ reasons can be probably boiled down to just stupidity and bureaucracy and just like backdoor suits conversations that basically run a lot of like DeFi 1.0. And so I think that's, from my perspective, I think, again, this would have to be something that's sort of much more arduous and much less transparent than the way Bribe is proposing here.
Absolutely. A lot of value add when Bribe gets involved. I know we have another AMA tomorrow on Twitter Spaces, same time, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're getting close to the top of the hour. I just want to see if anyone in the audience has one final question before we wrap it up and say thank you. I'm not seeing anyone raise a hand right now. Are there any final thoughts from the host that we have up here?
I think that Bribe is pretty revolutionary when you look at the state of governance right now. Condorcet took a step back and looked at it as a whole, set up paste-mailed situation in terms of the way he built Bribe. And this is, so far all we've talked about is the MIM Aave situation, MIM Aave proposal. There's so many more things that he's building with us at Composable that he hasn't even touched upon. So this isn't some one-off voting situation or can be compared to other voting or bribery protocols. This is a game changer in the space that brings transparency to a very murky world of governance where it's not only whales that you're competing against, but institutions. As he mentioned earlier with the Uniswap thing, I brought up Maker before, and it is a really, really crazy world when you start talking about hundreds of millions of dollars locked up in these protocols, and some guy, some whale or some institution can start dictating this, and you can't do anything about it. Or you have your friends, basically, you help your friends to bribe the things you want, and that's not very transparent either, like some protocols are trying to do. And then, it's a insider's game, and it's rigged, literally. So I think that people are really underestimating the big problems that Condorcet's out there to solve.
On that note, buy the LBP, especially if you, like we're saying, like see yourself hanging around. It's, a lot more of us, of course, than there were 6 months ago, like working on these problems and really paying attention to them. It's just as, as we were hoping the story was going to go. Start building the marketplace and the forum will manifest. So thank you so much for being here. Participate in the LBP, and quick recap on how you're going to get paid through Bribe. Stake Bribe or Aave on the website. Wait, your Bribe will accumulate linearly over time. However, of course, your USDC reward for being a voter in Aave will only come after the MEM proposal has actually been voted on and actioned and all of that stuff. So wait for your USDC reward while your Bribe rewards accumulate linearly, and then earn. You'll withdraw everything to one wallet with a single transaction. Stake, wait, earn. Details on this will be out throughout next week as we're guiding everyone through their first time bribing. It'll actually be my first time too. So let's knock this out together. Thanks everyone for checking in.
We have a great opportunity tomorrow too day 2 of the AMA on Twitter Space. If people are looking to participate in that, to listen in. It's at Bribe Protocol on Twitter. I'd like to thank our hosts once again for being here, to spending time with the community. I appreciate the entire community for listening in as well. Medium is a great resource to read all the articles that are coming out about this LBP that we're launching on CopperLaunch. And with all that said, thank you again. I'm just getting a note too. There's a link in the chat as well, but thank you all so much. Hope you have a great Sunday, and hope to see you all at the AMA tomorrow, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Twitter Space at Bribe Protocol. Thank you again.